So before I get into the kind of formal, this is what he's written, blah, 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 he lives down the road from me about half a mile away. And at a very personal level, he's done me a couple of favours, one of which he's probably forgotten, one of which he probably does remember. And one of them is several years ago, we were both on the same platform at a Body, Mind, Spirit Expo. And wandering around it, I was totally dismayed because it felt like the kind of last death gasps of the New Age movement. There were people with stalls selling rubbish, and there were people claiming they had psychic abilities who were con artists, in my opinion. And it was just on that edge of commercialization gone bonkers. Beautiful grounds outside, though. And the people who were organisers wanted to film some of the presenters in order to do a promo video for the next one. So we were out there, and they were set up for the interview, and he and I were together. And they switched the cameras on. There was the microphone in my face, and it was, William Bloom, what do you like most about this festival? And I just dried up. I lost the plot completely because all that was going through my mind was this rant about this is the death throes of the New Age movement. It's been hijacked completely by commercialization and con artists. And Tim just came in after seeing me literally frozen with my mouth open, said, what William means to say is it's a really beautiful environment. And it was out in landscape. And anyway, he saved me. He saved me in that moment. I was very grateful, and I hold that as a fond memory. We also occasionally meet at stand-up comedy sessions. We share an enjoyment of stand-up. And recently, professionally, I said to Tim, I'm nervous about losing my broadband connection. What's going to happen if I've got a big class happening? Do you think could I have you as a safety net? And he said, yeah, you can come to mine if your broadband ever fails. Right, and do the class from my place. It's generous, brotherly, fraternal, neighbourly, good citizen. So Tim, at that level, honour unto you. Now Tim is one of our most prolific authors in our field. He's written more books than me. I can't swank about the number of books I've written. He's written more than me, and he's done what critics would call a smorgasbord of spirituality, what I would call a holistic overview of what's available and how to go deep into them, which I completely honour because I think in terms of modern citizens, a holistic education means familiarity with all the different paths, which then allow you to go deeper in your own way. So huge honour to him. So in this conversation, I want to explore with you, Tim. So big welcome to you. Thank you so much for being with us. This is the point where you can say, oh, thank you, William. It's lovely to be with you. And then we'll start.
Thank you, William. It's lovely to be with you. Which it genuinely is. It's a delight.
Excellent.
And with all of these other beautiful folks that I can see little pictures of.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? Zoom is wonderful. So here we are in the space of all these people, and we're all interested in you, right? Mm. So the way I want to conduct this conversation is I'd really, both for me personally and for the group in general, hear about your childhood influences that led to your awakening first, and then we'll go into kind of a little bit step by step what you were doing, because there's a huge array of stuff you got interested in, and I'm particularly interested in, as well as writing about it, what did you practice? Mm. What were you experientially doing? Mm. Bringing you up to date with where you're at now and your new project, philosophy. I don't know how to pronounce unindividual. How do you pronounce it?
Unividual.
Unividual. Okay, great. And we'll talk about unividualism. And but let's take a long journey there. People, I don't have the usual two support people that we normally have, and that's Sohini and Scott for various reasons can't make it. So I'm not sure whether we're going to do Q&A. If we do, it will be towards the end, and we'll do it in the chat box. If Tim is in a real good groove and flow, then we won't go into Q&A, because I'll be doing the questions to him. So Tim, after all of that, tell us where you were born, what your parents were like, and what kind of led you up to that awakening when you were 12.
I was born just down the road in a little town called Yeovil in the West Country of England. And my parents ran what was for Yeovil a fairly big hairdressing salon, they called it. My father was a very creative and quite skeptical in his approach to life. Quite difficult guy in his own way, but quite amazing as well. And my mum, in all honesty, William, is the closest I've ever come to a saint. She was just a bubble of love. I mean, people asked me, always, you probably get the same thing. Who are your big influences? Who was what was the guru that did it for you? And the honest truth is, it was my mum. I didn't realize that when I was little. I realized that when I got older. And I can remember the day I did realize it, when I was probably about 30 something. I just looked at her and just went, oh, it's you. You're the one who's teaching me how to love. And you've been doing it the whole time. And she affected everyone around her, especially the older she got. So I was very lucky.
Was she conscious of what a good influence she was?
I sat her down in her 80s. I should have done it way before. I sat her down in her 80s and I said, Mum, you're not going to last forever. Tell me now, what is it you're doing? How are you having this effect on people around you? Because she's so unself-conscious about it. I mean, she wasn't spiritual, really. She read spiritual books by me, but not by anyone else. And then I could have written books on train spotting and she would have read those. It was like, and I said to her, what is it that you're doing? And she looked very puzzled. She said, oh, I don't know. And I said, well, think about it. What are you doing? And she just said, well, I think it's that when I feel down about things, I just look around for someone to help and then I feel okay. And that was like, okay. Got it. Thank you. That's what I needed to know.
It's worth repeating. Repeat what she said again.
She said, I don't know, but I think when I feel down about things, I just look around for someone to help and then I feel okay. And that was her thing. That's what she did. And she was one of those, when she got cancer, she died of cancer, but she got cancer earlier on at a time when before I was a writer, I was a musician. And so I wrote her a song, and the idea behind the song, I think I still love it. It was called Famous Amongst Angels. And it was a kind of poetic idea that in heaven, if you like, no one had heard of the pop stars or the famous politicians, or it's like Madonna, no idea who that is, but people like my mum, all these little people that everyone knew them. It was like in heaven, they were really famous. It was like, oh yes, my God, Ellen Freke. And I love the idea that the people that are famous amongst men, as it were, are different to the ones that were famous amongst angels. It was a poetic idea, but it captured that sense of often the people we least see, not the great teachers and the great writers and the people with a big mouth like me, who are just quietly doing it, are often the most special of all.
The meek shall inherit the earth.
Yeah. So I was very lucky in that respect, and I'm sure that had a big influence. Hugely supportive parents, and the route to my awakening really came between. I was a very precocious kid in other ways as well, but I don't know why. I was just a weird kid, but my mum would take me. My dad was a skeptic, but my mum would take me to church, and then she stopped going, and I would go on my own. And
what kind of church?
Anglican. And then I stopped. But to me, the biggest thing was that ever since I can remember, way, way, way back, life has always seemed profoundly mysterious. And it seemed very strange to me that all the grown-ups were walking around as if they kind of knew what was happening, and they clearly didn't. And no one seemed to know what was going on, not my teachers, not my parents or anything. And it felt, I can remember walking with my dad, I was supposed to be 8 or 9, and go and just asking, what is this? And him saying, I remember his line so well, he just went, well, Timothy, greater men than you and I have asked these questions and found no answers. And I can remember with that huge arrogance of being young, I just remember thinking, well, I will, because it's such a big question. There has to be an answer to it. And in some ways, I think that what happened to me, there's a hill which overlooks Yeovil called Summerhouse Hill. And I used to walk there with my dog early in the morning often. And I would sit there and just look at all these people running around in the town, wondering what they were up to and trying to, what is life? What is death? And, why is it like it is? And then one day something happened, and I had no idea what it was at the time, but now I would say it was my first shift into a deep awake state. And the biggest memory that I have, I wrote about it afterwards because that's what I do. I write, and so I have some records. But the biggest thing I remember is the love, this enormous love, like everything was being held within love. And because my only vocabulary I had was Anglican, really, my dad, despite his skepticism, would often say that God is love. That was his one thing that he had. And it was like, oh, right, okay, so this is God. This is the love. And it completely blew me away.
So just pause with that for a second, because
Sure.
I think it'd be really useful for people, for me, to know, when you had that experience, philosophical, felt, was it just a knowing that the universe is made of love, or did you feel that you yourself were love?
As best I know, it's obviously a long time ago,
Yeah.
50 years ago. But as I remember it, and with the little clues that I left myself, it was the feeling that the whole universe was vibrating with love. That's the way I felt. Like it was holding me and everything. There was a love which permeated everything. The grass was greener, the birds were singing clearer, the sky was bluer. And the thing, apart from it was an experience I just wanted to have again and again and again, there was also a sense in which it felt like, oh, hang on. Afterwards, it felt like it was almost like the answer to the question. I couldn't say what the question, the big question. It was too big to put into words, and that the answer was too big to put into words. That there was an existential question which I tried to capture with, what is this? But the answer came with a shift whereby I perceived in a different way. Now, those are words I'm using now. I wouldn't have used those when I was young. But that's essentially what I think I took from it. And that is, Carl Jung, interestingly, I came across years later saying that for some people, life has a seed from which their life grows. And that, without a doubt, that was the moment. That was the seed from which my life would grow. And everything I did afterwards, even when I was doing music, was all about how do you achieve that shift in myself and how can I share it with others?
So how did that influence your teenage years, and when were you doing music, and what kind of music were you doing?
Oh my God, I did all sorts of music. A bit like as a writer, I wanted to be everyone. So, there's times when it was edgy sort of new wave stuff. There was some almost like, I had a big horn section at one time. We were doing almost kind of like Earth, Wind and Fire. I had recording studios. I wrote TV music. I wrote for dance. Modern dance.
Oh, so you were actually making a living from music?
Oh, sometimes. we won a talent show on the TV.
Oh, really? What was your band called then?
They were called Godot at that time, as in waiting for.
Waiting for. That's very pretentious and intellectual.
It's very pretentious, and I can remember us at our very first gigs in a little club in Bristol being introduced enthusiastically as Godot.
So did you do A-levels in uni or not?
Yeah, I did A-levels, and then I dropped out to play rock and roll music.
Okay.
And went to university later. But also in that time, during the whole time, I'm exploring how can you affect consciousness.
Uh-huh.
Reading.
In what way were you exploring it?
Well, partly philosophically, I guess. Looking back, earliest influence I would say was probably Mohandas Gandhi. Mm-hmm. Probably through my dad, because he'd been in India after the war and talked about him, and so that had been a way through. Became very active in the peace movement, very young, got myself in a bit of trouble with that because of the effect it was having at the school.
Good.
Yeah. The guy who ran the Peace Pledge Union came down to see who is this 15-year-old. It signed up half the school.
I was going to put in brackets here. My school, I was 13, I was wearing Band the Bomb badges and doing all the master marches, and the head teacher got so bothered by it that they called in my parents to try and sort it out.
Very similar. So I didn't get in trouble. So things had moved on a little by then, and I didn't get in trouble, but it was exciting. And he did come down. He was like, no one had joined the There was a Peace Pledge Union, and no one had joined for about 5 years, 6 years, I don't think. And suddenly, Yeovil Comprehensive School, all these kids were joining.
So you were an activist.
Yeah, always. Yeah,
little teenage activist.
Yeah.
What A levels did you take? Because that kind of shows us what kind of mind you had as a teenager.
Music.
Music, okay.
And English.
All right.
And I was meant to be doing sociology, but I dropped out so I could concentrate on playing music.
Okay. And you said you went to uni later.
Much later, but I did quite a bit in between. I mean, it's a few years, but it was very intense. I was moving between things very intensely. So I had I had an Indian guru for a while and did a lot of meditation.
Which one?
The Premrat Maharaji.
Oh, the fat boy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should say he was known colloquially as the little fat boy, wasn't he?
He was. And if anyone's interested, I mean, one of the biggest events of the year this year is that I have this series, What is Life, in which I speak to people. And
you spoke to him?
And I thought, I'll never get to speak to him. He will never talk to me. He's still speaking to hundreds of thousands of people, but also he's never done interviews. It's not his thing. And he's remote, and he was very remote for me. He was God when I was little. He was literally God, and I left and all the rest of it. But that's who he was. And just landed in my lap, William. Somebody came and stayed with us who worked for him, and the next thing I knew, I was sitting down filming with him. It was quite an experience to be having been a teenager, looking up to this picture of him, singing to him as a devotee. And then sitting next door to him talking about philosophy was.
Let me just pause you there. This is really interesting. Because what you're making explicit for us is you have this philosophical bent which requires thought and analysis and inquiry, and yet at the same time you have this devotional
very strong devotional.
And you quite often don't see those two integrating because the philosophical side quite often will sabotage the devotional side, and the devotional side's got no time for the philosophical stuff. So it's really unusual to hear that you were doing both as a young man.
Always loved both. I mean, and in some ways, I feel a bit embarrassed looking back because I was the sort of person that, I feel bad for all my girlfriends because all the love songs were about God. My love affair was with God.
Well, maybe they were relieved.
Maybe they were. But I do feel a bit bad, it feels like, I don't know, maybe it was a bit misplaced, but yes, a big devotional thing going on, as well as philosophical.
And you then went to uni?
No, still loads happening still between there still. I was only a few years.
Yeah.
But the relevant things here spiritually is LSD, which was amazing. Absolutely amazing, and mushrooms and all of that, and that
as a temporary lifestyle or as a deliberate exploration.
Deliberate exploration.
Okay, good.
And just doing that with Peter Gandy, who I ended up writing with. Peter and I have been traveling together. Really, I've always had very close people who I travel with, still do the same people 50 years later, and we've traveled together and. Yeah, that was the same thing, just back to the same place. And my sense was, there's a million ways to get to this place. And you're suddenly in that deep awake love and that communion, that oneness. And then I read a book by a William Bloom, I seem to remember.
Really?
What's the one you did about the very early? What was it might have been your first one actually.
I don't know, because I started off writing novels. So
Oh, did you? Okay, right. So it wasn't a novel. It was about your experiments with magic.
Oh, the Abramelin, Sacred Magician.
That's right. So I had got into, actually I read that after I'd really got into it. But when I had a very intense journey into the occult.
Okay.
Which was absolutely full on. I mean, that was like, I didn't take any drugs at that time. And it was like being tripped out every day, all day in some other world. It was just,
I didn't know.
Just mind-boggling.
So you explored the Western mystery tradition.
Totally. Kabbalah.
Experientially.
Yeah, all of that. So I went from the Indian guru to the Western Kabbalah.
Okay.
And everything was less very intense, you know. So that was it. And that got so intense that eventually I pulled out of it and went into the first period of retreat, got a meditative retreat. And that's when I read your book.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't recommend that book to anybody now. It's kind of like a Piscean maniac's way of doing it, but it's out of date. And,
right. It's a long time ago.
But it's interesting to name for people that young men, especially, and some women who dive into the Western mystery tradition, esoterics, the occult, because they're exploring energy work and correspondences, it can become quite manic, and one's own nervous system can get overwhelmed.
And you just enter a world. For me, it was like, I mean, I still, of all the periods in my life, that's where I still have the most experiences. I think, what the hell was that? I mean, it started off, I'd been to India with my father, actually.
Oh, really? You went with your dad?
Yeah, he'd always said he'd take me because he loved India, because he was in India in the war. And when he'd been there, because he was a curious guy, all the squaddies he was with, they all hated India, but he loved it and would go off cycling and exploring, cycling up mountains and God knows what. And he wanted to take me back there. And so he took me, and we spent a bit of time in India. And I came back, I was 18.
Okay.
And I came back from India dressed head to foot with Tibetan clothes that I'd bought in Nepal. And from various things that had happened in India, that's when I decided I wanted to meet a magician, and I wanted to study directly. I didn't want to read about it. And in the way that things work, I just sat on my bed in my bedroom at my parents' house, which I was back living in then, and meditating. Had a very strong experience, and just said, "This is what I want." And literally the next morning, 11 o'clock, the phone went, and it was my friend Peter Gandhi once again, who was living in Cardiff, going, Tim, I've just met this guy. And that was that. And off we went. And that began a year of unbelievable, crazy, exciting, strange experiences.
Yeah, I think the lesson for us and for people listening is, I always think of consciousness. One of my definitions of consciousness in humans is expansion is curiosity. And you talked about your dad being curious, but there's a curiosity, and there are moments. Do you remember Irina Tweedy? This talked about throwing herself into the fire, just into the chasm of fire. And there are moments where you risk, and you dive into where your curiosity takes you. Absolutely right.
And it is a risk.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's something about youth, and I certainly had it, where I just felt invulnerable, really. I felt like I could do anything.
It's difficult. It's difficult, though, isn't it, to talk about now, because there's so much awareness of the mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And the fact that people can mess up their brains and get delusional, and what looks like psychotic experiences.
Yep.
But nevertheless, there's this place for people to be curious and to go out of their comfort zone.
I think it's very individual. Yeah. I just knew that, like I said, from very early on, it's like, this is the most amazing adventure, and I just want to just find out what it is. So anyone that would come along and say, try this, like, okay, let's try that and see where it leads.
What kind of a character were you then? Because I was extraordinarily earnest and not very nice. Yeah, I think. Looking, what kind of person were you then?
Oh God, I've been spending so long in my 60s looking back on my life with embarrassment. I I think probably the biggest thing was naive.
Okay.
In that, well, I was young,
Yeah.
but yeah, just unable to, and moving between things. Part of that was, it wasn't assimilating. I was literally like chapters in a book. This, now this, now this, now this. And it wasn't until later that I began to go, right, how does all that fit together?
Right. So let's because we've only got an hour or so.
Yes, we're gonna
let's fast forward. Let's fast forward this a bit.
Yes.
So uni books, right?
Books.
Now the thing about your books is they explore so many different traditions. Now, you had a bestseller to begin with.
No, the other way around. It's got three phases, my writing, William, I would say. So the first phase was really what you're saying. It was going through all the different traditions that I'd studied and practiced in, all of them actually, over the years. So I was in my 30s now. I'd been a musician. It hadn't quite worked out, been exciting, blah, blah, blah. And the writing just happened, again, in this way that things can. I literally, a friend of mine became an author and said, Tim, you're a writer, really. And he was right. I was a writer. That's what I always should have been. Why don't you send in something to my agent? And I said, I got nothing. Well, actually, I had. I had this, I wanted to do a version of the Tao Te Ching to music. And because I couldn't find a version of it that really was how I understood it, I'd started writing my own.
Okay, just press the pause button and repeat Tao Te Ching so everybody knows what you're talking about. Okay,
so the Tao Te Ching, thank you for stopping me. The Tao Te Ching is a Chinese Taoist scripture, I guess you'd call it. So 500 BC, something like that. And I'd been reading it since I was a teenager, and it had a big effect on me. And I wanted to just read it to music. It was all I was interested in doing at that time. And so I sent that, and in the way that life happens, it just landed on my agent's, literally on her desk, literally at the same time as a letter from a publisher saying, we're doing a new series of Chinese classics. Do you know anyone who could do a Tao Te Ching? And that was that. And the Chinese expert read it and went, this is great, and off I was. And that was my door open. And then it was like, okay, I want to explore Zen. I want to explore Tibetan Buddhism. I want to explore all these different things. In a way, in quite an introductory way, like what's the essence of it? But also going, look, at its heart, there are people experiencing the same sort of thing that I experienced when I was 12 and I've been exploring ever since, and then talking about it with the language that they have available. And the way they talk about it is all different, but the essential thing they're experiencing seems the same. So that was my first phase of writing. And then the second phase was when I focused in on Gnosticism, and I wrote a book called The Jesus Mysteries with Peter Gandy, who's come up a few times because he was involved in all these other things. He was a classicist by then. And we wrote this book on Gnostic Christianity, which was controversial because it was going, the Jesus story is a Gnostic myth, which is an allegory for the process of coming to gnosis, or spiritual awakening. The gnosis is also another name for what I've been exploring all my life. And that changed everything, because then, that was a big, that was my moment of walking into a bookshop and seeing the front covers just full of my book and going, wow, I can't believe this, and getting driven around in big cars in America. All of that, which was very good fun. And then this last phase, which I haven't sold anywhere near as many books, but is by far the most significant, I think, has been going, okay, now I'm getting older. The thing which attracts me about all the individuals I've written about, is that they reinvigorated the spirituality they found for their own times. That's why I'm interested in them. I should stop writing about them, and I should do what they did, which is to try and make a contribution towards reinventing spirituality for the 21st century. And one of the big things that needs to do, in my view, is it needs to be able to integrate with our scientific understanding, but on its own terms, so that they can really sit together. And that's been my passion now. That's what I do every day.
So that's a wonderful introduction and foundation to what I was going to ask you, and I shall ask you now. So what are you doing now? What are you doing now, and why, and how? And I'll tell you, before you go into it, do you have a daily practice? What are you doing now in terms of your own personal self-care and all that kind of stuff? And then we can explore. Tell us about the.
The other day I thought, do I meditate anymore, or do I just sit and be quiet? I think I might just sit and be quiet.
Is there any difference?
I'm not sure there is anymore. So the sitting and be quiet has got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I can connect with that which is greater than me more readily than when I was young, it was like in, out. It was like big, and then, oh God. And now it's not like that. I'm not in this exalted state or anything like that. No, nowhere near. But it's close to me. It's not a million miles away. And when I take the time, it's lovely to sink into it. As you did just at the beginning. It's like, poof, there it is. And I'm very grateful for that. Mm-hmm. And then so that's that. But also the philosophy to me is a practice. It's like pushing my ideational network to see if I can perceive the universe in a deeper way. And as I shift ideas, suddenly it opens up a new experience. I think philosophy is intensely experiential. Because the process of reflection may be a bit abstract, because well, in effect, you're talking to yourself, aren't you? I mean, that's when we're thinking, we're imagining talking. So I'm doing what I'm doing with you, but just there's no you, there's just me. And you're having to play both parts, and questioning and doubting and pushing and seeing. But when insight comes, it's experiential. And suddenly you're in a new world. And that is incredibly exciting.
Okay, so what's the big one that happened in the last decade that is now the foundation of your teaching?
I think it was adopting something which had always been there, but became very, very much more important, was taking an evolutionary perspective. So the big shift, I wrote a book called Soul Story. It's my latest book. It's been out for a while now. I think it's my most significant.
Soul Story.
And it's a philosophy book in little nuggets of think this. And what I'm doing now is a massive expansion of it, which has taken me, I should have been finished 2 or 3 years ago, I thought, but I'm still right in it. And this is what I need to complete. I know that.
So can you, not an elevator pitch, but
in essence,
a 5-minute kind of, what's it about?
Some of the underlying ideas, they may seem a little bit abstract if I say them quickly, but maybe people will get them.
We'll say them slowly.
Yeah, I'll give it up, which is that. So I'm faced with, my big question is, what is this? Now, what is it that's happening? Because it's pretty full on. What is it? And what I see is that what's happening is a process. There's the flow of experience in which every moment realizes something new that's never happened before based on what's happened in the past. And so the line I'm following is, what if that is the nature of reality? The nature of reality is the realization of potentiality in ever more emergent ways. So this incredible view that we've got now from science that for the last 100 years that the universe isn't a thing, it's a process. And it starts in the simplest way you can imagine. And then it has arisen in ever more emergent ways. Emergent meaning a big evolutionary shift, like the emergence of life from matter, say, or the emergence of psyche, soul, from biology. And that it's taken us through from what looks like in science right now an informational level that's become, like in quantum physics, where it's possibilities which are really only understood mathematically, have no mass, for instance, or anything like that. They're not things. Into things and the universe of things, into, here at least, life, and then from life, this transmaterial dimension that we're in, where we're sharing ideas. And the way I get that very much is like when I'm doing this, I'm aware that my mouth is moving. That's biology and making funny noises. But what we're sharing is meaning. But there's no meaning in the biology or in the air or in the funny noises. The meaning is all on this new level of psyche. And psyche is Greek for soul, in the soul. So we've gone from mathematics to soul. And that's happened over 14 billion years. So the fundamental thing I'm following is, what if everything that has any form whatsoever is part of this one process? Everything. So that the formless potentiality is being informed by information and becoming everything on ever more emergent levels. And the two things which it challenges, one is for science and one is for spirituality. So the challenge for science, as it's commonly understood, is evolution didn't stop at biology. Evolution goes right the way up, and it's not really physics. It's really all of it. And you can't reduce it because it's more emergent. It's more than, and you can't reduce it. And therefore, let's take the soul or psychic level very, very seriously, because it's the most emergent. And then what I'm playing with spirituality is that all those domains, the spirit world, the bardos, those are not things which exist outside the process of evolution. They're the most emergent level of evolution. That's where the whole process is going. And then the big jump, and I'll end with this, is for me, which has really helped, has gone, well, when I started this, and I said, when I first had that experience, it's like, oh, this is God. And then I went through a period where it felt like I can't do that anymore because there's some real problems with the traditional idea of God. Some big problems. Like, if God is this all-powerful, loving presence at the beginning, there's the classic problems that everyone knows. The existence of evil, for instance. Why there's all the bad shit if there's a loving God? And there's lots of clever ideas, none of which work for me. It's like, I was reading the other day about a kid who had his brain eaten from the inside by a microbe. It's like, no, there's no excuse for that. If God is running the show, it's not how I experience God. And then, five complete extinctions. This God doesn't know what they're doing. It's like, what the hell, dinosaurs? Why? It's absurd. It doesn't work. And also, it doesn't explain anything because you've just explained one mystery by a bigger mystery. It's like the universe is being solved because it's God. Well, so the big shift that happened when you said, what's the big one? Was going, oh, so if this is going from the simplest thing I can imagine to the most full realization, this is not coming from God, it's going to God. God is the most emergent level. The universe is flowering into that greater than me thing that I experience and have been following. That's not where it comes from. That's the highest level of this process. And that's what I'm exploring.
Thank you. Thank you. If we were teenagers, I'd pass you a joint at this point. So have a toke on this. All right, so I've really listened very hard. Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions. Okay, let's take the word God out of it.
Yep.
And let's just acknowledge what mystics have always said, which is, we don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. And you started off with the very beginning of this conversation by talking about the mystery. It's a mystery.
Totally.
But
that's the foundation of everything.
But when people go into altered states on a daily rhythmed basis, using all the different strategies for getting there, and they're stable and curious and inquiring, there is a consistent experience that the mystery is benevolent.
Yes.
At a cosmic level.
Yes.
Despite the
yes.
cruelty and the suffering and the idiocy and the sociopathy of the human species and all the rest of it, right? So what I'm trying to do is, so you've got this emergent dynamic. The cosmos itself is emerging into its new potential, whatever that is. And maybe it's just not knowing what it is second by second until it actually happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in my model, I'll tell you where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
In my model, and I'm trying to pack yours in with it. Mm-hmm. In my model, there is this unconditional benevolence that flows through the universe, seeking to integrate everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there as an underlying dynamic, seeking to permeate everything you've just described.
So that would have been my model.
It would have been.
That was my model too.
Yeah, but it's shifted.
Yeah. And what I would say now is that benevolence exists now. Like life exists now, but it didn't. Now it does. Consciousness didn't exist, and then it did.
Okay.
That didn't exist, and then it did. And that actually these higher things are emerging. And my guess, I mean, obviously these are philosophical speculations to try and make sense of my experience. And what that does for me is it goes, that's why it's so benevolent. And yet the things which has led to it is such a mixed bag, because it's not running the show. It's arising from the show. And the way that it's come to me, the way that I'm exploring is, it feels like it's somehow all of these individual cells, what started off as individual cells became multicellular organisms by coming together and forming something greater like my body. And my sense is that as we come into a state of recognizing that we are one with the universe, because we are the universe arising as these individuals in relationship with itself. We are the one in relationship to itself. What else could we be? Everyone is. Everything is. That as we recognize that, and that's what you said earlier about the unividual, that's what I mean by the unividual, the individual conscious of unity with the universe. And I think that's the leading edge of our evolutionary movement here. So that awakening that I've been playing with all my life, and I think that is the next jump in evolution. But as we come into that, I think a communion of souls is arising, just like the communion of cells. Okay. And it's that communion of souls, like the phrase is that you get the communion of souls around God in Christian theology. What I'm suggesting is, no, the communion of souls is God. That's what's creating this greater than us level of reality, which is utterly benevolent and loving and present and permeating everything now.
So let me toss in another question.
Sure.
In the Whole Foods store in Glastonbury, where many deep and philosophical conversations take place, I once met Serena Roney Dougal. Serena Roney Dougal, local author, wrote a very famous book called Where Science and Magic Meet. And she managed to get academically funded, to do some research in some Tibetan monasteries that were way off the beaten track. And the research was specifically to talk with psychic monks and their philosophy. So this is a conversation we're having in the Whole Foods store. And I said to her, wow, I said, what was the biggest edge you met with them? And she said it was these psychic monks in these Tibetan monasteries said, there is no such thing as time. There is a dimension that transcends time. And then I said, did you ask? She said, yes, I did. I said, you know what I was going to ask her, which was, did you ask them about reincarnation, which happens through time? And she said, yes, I asked them. So there were these psychic monks talking to me about a timeless dimension. And then I asked them about reincarnation, which takes place in time. And I said, what did they reply? And she just said, they just put their hands up like this and rolled their eyes. Don't ask me to articulate that one. Anyway, so listen, Professor Guru Tim, in everything you've just described, how does the soul's journey fit
Yeah.
into that?
So what the again the kind of controversial, I guess you'd call it, thing that I'm exploring
Yeah.
is that the immortality of the soul, which I absolutely think is a reality, has itself evolved, like all of the other miracles that have evolved. And that as we've evolved onto a non-material level or a transmaterial level, which we're experiencing right now and always experiencing, that will become that when the body, I'm a psychobiological system. When the biological part of the system fails and I can't sense the world anymore, the imaginal system continues, and I go deeper into that. And that seems to be what's happening with the near-death experiences and the great spiritual traditions of the world that I've written a book about, actually, called In the Light of Death years ago, exploring what they were saying. The difference between what I'm now saying and what I would have said then is then I kind of felt like most of the traditions that just exists. I don't know how, it's just there. And now I'm going, yeah, but what if it's arisen as one process? And that is a very emergent level of the process. So that the soul has arisen from the body, and then the soul has learnt how not to die. And that's what's bringing about the process of metempsychosis, of reincarnation.
Are you saying then, because it's very interesting, I may have misunderstood you.
Okay.
Because most esoteric traditions would suggest that the soul emerges out of some kind of event, breath, and they come as like little sparks or flames or whatever it is, and they land into the creature.
So the opposite of that is what I'm saying.
So you're saying
no, the opposite.
There's a creature somewhere, biologically, historically, out of which this consciousness arises.
Yeah. So in this way, much more like the scientific view, which is that the universe is the oneness. See, for me, when they talk about the timeless, we should get into that maybe as well, because I think it's just a mistaken philosophy. The experience of timelessness is absolutely real, but the understanding of it, I think, is mistaken. And it's a common mistake that runs through most spirituality. But most spirituality's philosophies are very old. And, things have moved on an awful lot. And I think we need to turn it on its head. And we keep all the essence, but we lose some of the way it's been previously understood. So that there's a oneness of being, let's call it, a quality of existing, which is being informed, and it's forming all these different systems in relationship to itself. So this is the one in relationship to itself on a journey or process of realizing ever greater, more emergent possibilities, happening right now as we speak. We're doing it on the psychic level by thinking new ideas that haven't been thought before. It's happening. It's happening faster and faster. And that has included everything. So one of the jumps has been where life forms. One of the jumps has been when life becomes sentient and conscious. We need to discuss what that means, but that's what's happened. And then you've got the psyche, which is images of the sensory world. But that's you can see that starting in animals, but really taken off for us. And we've created this gigantic realm. I call it the imaginos. It's like the cosmos has given birth to the imaginos, which is full of imaginal information. Where if you go off exploring it like I did when I studied occultism or took LSD or ayahuasca or meditation, it's just huge out there. You know this very well. And what I'm suggesting is that's not pre-existent. That's arisen from the lower levels. And the mistake is to think we can reduce things. We can't. The more emergent levels are greater by definition. That's what they are. They're more emergent. And that's the one process of the one in relationship to itself.
Wowie zowie. Kapow. If we were in a room together with all these folk, I'd be going, hands up everybody who followed all that, right? And then, and I can see some people going, oh, I didn't quite follow that, right?
Okay.
So it's I'm going to try and rephrase what you've said as I understand it.
Sure.
And I'm not sure I agree with you, actually, which is great.
I didn't expect you would, William.
I love not agreeing.
Me too.
As long as it's done with love and goodwill.
We get there by exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really interesting to me is your suggestion that the imaginal world, the world of kind of everyday psychism and metaphysics, is actually emerged out of humanity's evolution.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't disagree with that. And so if I was going to look at the engineering of it, I would say, okay, everything we think and feel radiates, creates an energy field, creates thoughts, creates emotions, and the whole of our planet is surrounded by thought forms and emotional forms that humanity and animals as well and other realms have created over the millennia, right? And that is...
What do you mean surrounded the world? What does that mean?
They float around like clouds. There are thought forms. So there are clouds of energy to do with...
Because when I look at my imaginal experiences, they don't look like they're anywhere.
Okay.
When I look right now, they don't look like they're in space at all.
I'll give you an example then. So, for example, human beings are very good at greed, right? So millions of people have expressed greed. So in my occult map, there is an actual cloud of greed that's in the collective psyche of humanity.
I can agree with that, yeah.
And when an individual is tempted by greed, they have to manage not only their own stuff, but the fact that they may connect with this cloud of collective greed, and it may channel through them. Right?
Yep.
So there's a whole, and for me, that I was using the word imaginal to describe where this collective greed sits.
Yeah.
So, and there's also wonderful stuff as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff that humanity's created that's there. And I agree with you there. I buy that. But what I'm wrestling with is the notion that in other vibrational fields that have nothing to do with humanity, that are to do with the Pleiades and Sirius and space and stars and things I really hardly understand, there are definitely realms of beauty and love and imaginal stuff that's not created by humanity. It's there already. That attract us. So
my question with that would be, is it possible, once again, to see that as also emergent? Now, I'm talking about things emerging here. That doesn't mean that things aren't emerging in other planets and other areas and other things just as much or more.
Sure.
And the thing that strikes me about the psyche, because it's not in space, is that, our bodies are quite near. Some people here will be in other countries and all the rest of it. But our psyches are all right up close right now, because it's not spatial, and we're constantly close to those we love, for instance, and things like that. So it's a narrative connection, it feels to me, in the psyche. So it's quite possible that we can experience things which hypothetically might be emergent somewhere else. The reason it feels, it feels worth trying it out, and why literally I give it every day of my life, is because it offers such a simple narrative that can become intensely complex. And it has an elegance to it, because anything you put outside of that process, you've left, where did it come from? What is it? What's its nature? You're left really with, you haven't explained anything. Whereas if it's possible, maybe it's not, but if it's possible to go, well, I'm experiencing this flow of emergence. What if reality is a flow of emergence? And what if everything which has quality, including all of those things that spirituality has been exploring for years, since the earliest shamanic times, is the most emergent level of that?
Let's try another way of it. I think your model, what you've just described, is probably correct because the cosmos is expanding.
Well, what's so interesting?
Let me finish, Tim.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon.
That's all right. So the cosmos is expanding. We know that, and there's a sense that everything within it, bit by bit by bit, whatever it is, in its own way, is emergent and expanding too. And it's suffused by some benevolence, which is mysterious. Okay, so I think nearly everybody listening to this would go, yeah, okay, I can buy that. Now, what you're describing, this is the bit I think is we could hone in on, right? Mm-hmm. Is you're describing a method of exploring it, which by virtue of the fact you've called it philosophy, means that it's intellectual to a degree and has logical thoughts in it, which is not everybody's style.
No.
So what I'm trying to do right this minute is kind of create an inclusive space where we can go, okay, folks, we're agreeing on the essence, and you and I have got very different styles, right? But we're agreeing on the essence. It's expansive, it's emergent, everything is emergent, everything is expanding, but we have different ways of exploring it and articulating it.
So the underlying theme for me, so just so that you know, actually, because you might not know this now, but you know, that's only one side of what I do.
Yeah.
The other thing I do is I run deep awakening retreats here in Glastonbury, in which most of the time is spent staring in somebody else's eyes, and we do a bit of philosophy, but we do a lot of meditation, and we do a lot of gazing and listening, and that's about how can you actually experience this unividual state? Because if someone doesn't get the big love, they've got no idea what I'm talking about. If they don't actually feel that I'm overwhelmed by love thing at some point, they got no idea why I'm saying any of this. Because it's not an abstract map. It's a way of experiencing reality. And it's a way of explaining the experiences which I have had and which I've studied other people having. That's what it is. And it's a way of moving your ideational network around so that you suddenly find it's more accessible to experience the same things in new ways or new things you've never experienced. But it also requires, like I said, you know, if someone comes to one of my deep awakening retreats, then it will be overwhelmingly a love experience. That's primarily it. Yeah. And yet these two, for me, they go together. And if we want, what I feel that spirituality has an important role to play in the next evolutionary jump of humanity and society. But I don't think it's up to the job because it hasn't kept up with science. Science has gone through the roof, whereas spirituality has been repeating the same old ideas over and over again.
All right, so let me try something on you. We know that there are, and I'm saying we need to we're coming into the last 5 or 10 minutes of this. We know that there are different styles and modalities for coming into the reality that you're talking about. And the way you're expressing your style and your teaching and the philosophy and the staring in the eyes and everything, it's actually quite purposeful and intense. Right? Which may be 100, which is 100% perfect for people for whom that particular style is what is needed. And actually, I think everybody should have that style in their suitcase, in their toolbox. And anybody who's listening to this and going, oh, well, Tim's a little bit too intense for me. There's too much head stuff going on. I would say you need that in your toolbox. because it ensures a certain level of purposefulness and a certain level of purposeful inquiry, and you don't end up just sitting on your ass being complacent about it all. So I think you're absolutely representing something hugely, hugely useful and benevolent.
And I think there's something, for me, I wrote a book called The Mystery Experience. That was my book just before the last one. And we haven't talked much about the mystery. You mentioned it a bit. It's like the whole of this is rooted on the thing when I was 12 sitting on the hill going, what is this? And that's what I wake up with every morning. And because I think we don't have to choose this or that, we can have both. It feels like, look, find the deepest understanding you can, Tim, because that will open up how to live this as fully as possible, but never lose. Wow. It's just, the mystery is unspeakable. And that doesn't have to stand in opposition to the devotion, to the love, to connecting with each other. All of these things are part of the human journey. And no one has to do all of them, but I'm greedy.
Yeah, but I think there's something else here, which is, let's move into the last couple of minutes here, and which is, I ran the alternatives program at St James's for quite a while. And so there were loads and loads of teachers. And one thing I noticed was, there's what they taught and there's the way in which they taught it.
Yes.
So people, a lot of folk actually come to a particular teacher or style of teaching because they need to internalize that characteristic that the person has. They need to internalize it and put it into their internal jigsaw.
Right? What a great insight.
Yeah, it was kind of obvious after a while, actually.
Yeah, that's such a good insight. Yeah.
So I'm selling you now to my people who are listening, right?
He's not as mad as he seems. Is that
Tim is a very important piece of the jigsaw that people need to put in place. And just because it may be new for them, new for you, new for me, curiosity leads you to going, okay, Tim's style, I wonder what I would be like if I put Tim's style into the jigsaw that is me. Let's put that part into me. And maybe that will shift some stuff and make it easier for me to expand and grow. And he's done all that stuff for me.
And it is kind of intense. But the biggest thing it is for me, William, is it's playful.
Yeah.
It's like, we're on this adventure together, and there's a playfulness. If we can relax into being ourselves. Again, when I run the Deep Awakening retreats, my biggest thing is like, everyone just be yourself. Just relax. Just completely be yourself. And then let's dive in together, and you will be astonished, and you will fall in love with each other, and you will see such beauty that you can't even begin to put words on it. Yeah. And it'll all happen in a couple of days. And you may go home with a few ideas as well. And that feels like the heart of it. And then the rest is really supporting it. There's a line, this will kind of round it up for you. There's a line in Soul Story, which is a philosophical book, And if people are interested, I should say this because my wife will tell me off if I don't. If people are interested in talking philosophy and experiencing these things, if they want to experience them, they can. There's the next retreat's at New Year here. But if they want to talk philosophy as well, I meet every Sunday online. It's all on my website, timfreke.com. And we have these little explorations.
Let me pause you there. If you want to follow up with Tim, timfreke, one word, .com.
And Freke is spelled Freke. Yes. You have to get that bit right.
Yeah. Tim. And if you want to know about all the books, I actually think Amazon's the best place to go.
Amazon's the best place. Also on my website, they're all there. Yeah. But this is the idea I feel I want to leave it on for me, William, which is that. So I wrote this big philosophy book. It's not a big book, actually, a little philosophy book, but deep, demanding in a way. And in the middle, I felt like I had to make this confession. And so I can make that confession to you and all of these lovely people who are here today, which was, look, all this philosophy is really, for me, about developing a strong, intellectually robust understanding to support these incredibly childlike, naive intuitions that arrive for me in the deep awake state. And which sounds so naive, it's like they're almost embarrassing, but they're the biggest truths I know. And the way I put it in the book was, what arises for me is, despite all the suffering, life is good, death is safe, and what really matters is love.
Yeah, and as Susan Cooper has just posted, woohoo, yay, in the chat box. So listen, everybody, we're going to bring it to a close now. I'm going to say thank you, and then Tim's going to round it all off with a little meditation, a blessing for us. So from all of us to Tim, thank you for a really engaging, wonderful hour. Fantastic.
I've thoroughly enjoyed being with you and with everyone. It's been
fantastically interesting, fantastically engaging. I'm very, very grateful. So listen, I'll put myself on mute now. And Tim, lead us in a couple of minutes just to help close us down.
So I want to invite everyone to come into our oneness, our communion of oneness. And I'm just going to do that very quickly by first inviting you to take your attention and focus it on your breath. And when I do that, suddenly something I wasn't even aware of before becomes very vivid. Beautiful, actually, to breathe. It's like I'm processing breathing in high definition suddenly by paying it attention. Such a pleasure, actually. And then I want to invite you to take that same attention and instead of focusing it on something in particular, open it right out to take in everything universally with the same vividness. Taking in the oneness of things. That there is a oneness within which you and I are embedded. That we are that oneness. And then finally, in this little short journey, be aware of your body breathing again. But this time, Be conscious that you are the one arising as you, in relationship with the one arising as everyone and everything. And just let's spend just a few short moments seeing how that feels to be intimately connected with everything and everyone. Thank you for coming on that little journey with me.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. I'm going to remove the spotlight from us. And I'm going to have everybody, if you just want to unmute yourselves and wave and say something like a goodbye to Tim or a thank you to Tim, that would be lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Tim. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessing. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm closing it down now.
Too.
Lots of love.
Yeah. Yes, lots of love.
Love and blessings.